let's digress a little bit and take a more detailed look at the pandas group by function. It's a very powerful function. It's very useful to understand how that works, and you can do a lot with it, right? We're doing fairly simple stuff, but we can actually do quite a lot with it. So let's say we start with a little data frame. A data frame here is contains, let's take a look at the data frame. It contains 4 columns: age, author, country, and gender. So it's for various authors. And what we do is we got 4 authors in our data frame: George Orwell, John Steinbeck, Pearl Buck, and Agatha Christie. And we know which country they come from: the UK, the USA, and UK. And they have genders available and ages. I just made up these. I suspect when I made these, I think they're the age that they actually died at. So they're all no longer with us, so to speak. And that's the age they died at, right? So we got that. Now we can group these by country. So we know how to do that. So we have a column called country. It's a categorical column. So all we need to do is to say writers.group by country, and we get let me close this. And we get the groups by country, right? So we can take a look at what these groups look like, and just to see here, the country is UK, and the groups are integers, 0 and 3. So these 0 and 3 refer to the the index column. We don't have a specific index column here, so it's telling us that UK is row 0 and row 3, which is what it is, and USA is row 1 and row 2, which is what it is. So that's just grouping them by their index values, right? So which makes sense. That's what it should do. We can do some basic analysis on the groups. We can see what is the first element in each group. So that gives us the group.first, tells us that George Orwell and John Steinbeck are the first elements in each each of the groups, right? The UK group and the USA group. So this is our groups, UK and USA, the first item there. We can look at the last item, and it'll tell us is Agatha Christie in the UK group and Pearl Buck in the USA group. Not that it really helps us that much, but it's a good way of looking at the data just to see examples, right? When you have large numbers of groups, you can do a group.first to see what are the items in each group, what kind of items are in each group. So you get some kind of result. More interesting would be we could add the groups and get a sum of the groups. What that does in this case is the column that we have that is summable is the age column, right? So what we can do is what this will do is it'll add up the age columns, and age columns here are 46 plus 85 for UK and 66 plus 80 for USA, and we get the sum there. We can find the mean, and that's the mean of the sum, and we can apply any function. Though we already have the sum function, I can apply any function to it, and when I apply the function, what it's doing is it's applying the function to the row and then returning the summary of the other stuff there. So we get here UK is 131. The author, both the authors are included here, and both the genders are included here. So we get a kind of summary of this whole thing through the apply function, because we're applying it on the group, and the group contains all the data for that group. Okay, that's the idea here. So we've already seen the groups, so that's good. We can group by multiple columns. We saw that too. So we want to group by country and by gender. So we do that, and we get a grouping now that it's grouped by country and gender. So we get UK female, and that contains row 3, which was Agatha Christie, and UK male, which contains row 0, which was George Orwell. This one here. And USA female, which was Pearl Buck, and that was row 2, and USA male, that was John Steinbeck, and that's row 1. So that's a multi-level grouping, and we can group by. But we can do even better things than that. Like we have been grouping here in our data. So if I look at my data again, let me just insert a cell above. Look at writers. So I've been grouping by country, gender. These are categorical columns, and we have age, which is the numerical column. I might want to group by age groups. So in the sense that let's say I have a column with multiple with a continuous variable, and I might want to group them by values of the variable: less than 10, greater than 10, that kind of, greater than 10, less than 20, that kind of stuff. What I can do is I can write a function. So here what I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to group by age groups. I'm going to say group in such a way that the age is less than 30 or the age is less than 60. Okay, And I have a young person, a middle person, and whether they died young, they died in middle age, or they died in old age. So if the age was less than 30 when they died, then they died when they were young, which actually is nobody here. If the age was less than 60 when they died, then they're middle aged, and that's George Orwell. And if otherwise they're died in old age. Okay, that's the idea here. So what I do is I write a function called age groups, and what I want to do is I want to take this value 46, for example, and decide on the group based on the value itself. So what I need to do is I need to pass to age groups a data frame, that is the entire data frame, writers, because that's where I'm grouping from. I need to pass the index of a row, so the row index would be 0, and the name of the column that I want to group on. So if I'm grouping on age, this column will be age. Okay. So what these two together will do is they are going to identify a single cell in the data, in my data frame. And now I get a data frame and a single cell in the data frame, and I look at the value of that single cell, and that determines, depending on that value, I return the grouping that I want for that cell, whether they're young, middle, or old. That makes sense, right? So again, what I'm doing is getting a single value for the cell and using that single value to decide on what kind of group it falls into. And notice that the labels I'm giving are my own. I can give whatever labels I want over here. So I can create my own groupings. So if I do this and I run the function, so what I want to take is take writers, and I want to apply group by. And for group by, I want to apply this function here where I vary the index, because I want to go row by row. Remember, when I group stuff, I group them in groups of rows. I'm taking subsets of the rows and including them in groups. So I want to take every row, extract from that row the specific cell that I'm looking at from the data frame, right? This is the data frame, and this is the specific cell I'm looking at. And notice that since I'm including the data frame here, it could be an independent data frame. It doesn't have to be the same data frame. I could be grouping one data frame by values in another data frame. Perfectly all right. Okay. And I get this thing over here. So now, so this gives me the cell. So this function will return young, middle, or old, and depending on that, the data will be grouped in young, middle, or old. So let's run this. And we get here, we don't have any young age person because 46 is the lowest here. So we get middle is row 0, which is George Orwell, and old is everybody else, which are John Steinbeck, Pearl Beck, Agatha Christie. So that's a very convenient way of grouping stuff together. And we can, to take another example, we can also group, just take a different example here. Let's say we have a bunch of people, and let me run this thing here. Oops. I need to import NumPy. I should have done that up front. I don't know why I didn't do that. Import NumPy as NP, import pandas as PD, just to be on the safe side. So here what I'm doing is here I'm going to combine a few things over here, so it's worth looking at this in more detail. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a data frame that has 5 columns, A, B, C, D, E, and 5 rows. And each row has an index, Joe, Steve, the name of a person. And I'm randomly putting numbers between +5 and 5 inside this thing here, right? So these are all random numbers. And if I run this again, of course, I'm going to get a completely different set over there. So I'm just creating this stuff here, calling the np.random function, which we looked at the NumPy random last time. So I'm looking at a random number normally distributed between 5 and I'm sorry, I misstated completely over there. I'm looking at a random 5 by 5 matrix of random numbers that are normally distributed with a mean 0 and a standard deviation of 1. So these are the numbers I get. So we see here we got 1.14, 0.79, -0.44, etc. Right? So what we want to do is we want to write a function that takes 3 arguments again, a data frame, index, and a column, and returns the grouping for that row. So we're going to group stuff. If it's greater than 0, it goes in group 1. Otherwise, it goes in group 2. Okay. So the reason I'm doing this is because we get more numbers and we can actually do some statistical stuff on it, right? So let's see. This is again straightforward. We pass it the data frame, the function, the data frame, an index, and a column, right? And we can use the index and the column to zero in on a single cell, right? Using the LOC function, and we say if that's greater than 0, then we return group 1, otherwise we return group 2. So let's run that and create the groups. So we get these groups. Group 1 has Joe, Steve, Jim. group 2 has Wes and Travis. And now we can actually compute statistics on these groups. That is kind of nice for us. So we've got all this stuff here. So I can, I'm just going to recreate those groups here by using the function. I haven't saved it anywhere. So I'm going to use this group creation and then run mean or standard deviation on it and actually get data, right? So get statistical values. So this tells us that group 1 has a mean of 1.15, group 2 negative 0.97, and a standard deviation of 0.37, and group 2 has a standard deviation of 0.73. So you can already see that if we were, like, for example, looking at say historical returns on a stock, and we wanted to group them by perhaps the industry group or even by let's say the trading volume, and you want to look at the returns, or even maybe some, like, say a 1 month prior return, like a lagging 1 month return with say like a 2 month return, a 1 month return 2 months ago with the 1 month return last month, and then compare the mean and standard deviation of the returns. We could do that quite easily using this sort of method over here. So grouping is a very, very versatile function to very versatile function to use the data frames. It's versatile because you can group by anything at all, and once you have the groups, you can find mean, standard deviations, or apply any function that you want to that grouping to do comparison across groups.